As of right now, there's 198 days until the Resident Evil remake is upon us. That is releasing March 24th of next year. That gives us an overabundance of time to dissect and hope for the best. Luckily, we have some tidbits of information to go off of to garnish an idea of how successful the remake could be. What exactly is the blueprint of success for this upcoming game, and how do we predict the quality of it? Let's use as much data and knowledge we have to figure those very questions out. First thing first, the hope. We all hope that the game will be great. It has a very high risk moniker attached to it based off of the legacy of one of the most revered games of all time, both financially and in namesake. A genre-defining legacy and advancement dating back to January 11th, 2005 on the GameCube. Not an easy task by any means, and I don't envy Capcom's position whatsoever. But backtracking to the hope part of it. We know Capcom has done this before. The remake of the first and second game in the series are beyond exceptional, and if you've seen my own opinion, the best Capcom has to offer. But obviously, superior and correct statements aside, what we can glean from those two lessons is a promising lead. I know exactly what you're thinking already. The Resident Evil 3 remake, or worse, half of the franchise that's a stinky raccoon's butthole.
That isn't true at all.
Well, FYI, the Resident Evil 3 remake isn't actually bad. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. It is fine. Mid, if you will. So at the worst, the Resident Evil 4 remake should be fine, which isn't good enough for the barometer of living up to the legacy of Resident Evil 4, the original game. But if it's the worst case scenario, that it's an okay game, that's still a playable and mostly enjoyable experience at the worst case. Great thing is, 2/3 of those games I just mentioned were beyond exceptional. So we could be looking at roughly a 66% chance of success. Now circling back to the Resident Evil 2 remake specifically, as this is more so the template for the Resident Evil 4 remake going forward, and what they're going to use and take as a reference and frame of mind. The gameplay nearly identical based off what we've seen and heard thus far. Also, we know the A-Team, air quote, we'll call them that for the sake of ease, is the one that made Resident Evil Remake 2, and they're doing Resident Evil 4 Remake. The B team that made the Resident Evil 3 remake, not in sight, so that should relinquish some concerns right there already. Now, there's no guarantee that the company still has those same exact employees that did that game, and that shouldn't be a huge issue, but just so you know, that could be a thing as well. It doesn't guarantee anything. With A New Hope established, let's get more into the fact side of things. As much as I want to hope the game turns out, I can assure you I'd much rather trust in facts for this to turn out as the master remake we all want it to be. So as far as facts go, we have a couple trailers to go off of so far, one of which does include some gameplay. Now, as someone who has personally done game design themselves, I can assure you, what we've seen is extremely close to what you're going to get. At this point, I'd wager that the only thing Capcom is doing with the Resident Evil 4 remake at this point in time is bug testing and fixing minor details in the game, aka polishing it. Maybe, if somehow they are behind finishing off the tail end of the game and maybe some of those cutscenes that they're rendering off. Beyond that, there's nearly a 0% chance any major reworks or changes are being done unless a new CEO takes over Capcom or the internal reception to the game is so bad that they yank it a la Metroid Prime 4. As we already know, the gameplay is nearly identical to the Resident Evil 2 remake and, for the most part, the 3 remake. If you didn't like those two games in the series, well, I'm sorry, but I can already assure you, you won't be liking this game. But for everybody else, I think you should have some peace of mind knowing, because we know the controls are solid already from those games. Camera, good to go, over the shoulders. We just need the facts in regards to the story and what is changing there, and how closely are we sticking to the level design of the original game. A long linear path stretching out a long distance. No backtracking really much at all like the traditional Resident Evil games, but instead a very linear experience with at times extreme ridiculousness. A rotating castle bridge. Bottomless pits and canyons everywhere, which is more heavily limited by the hardware of the GameCube, which, don't get me wrong, fantastic at the time, not good enough for now. So at least these drawbacks, I'd wager, will be addressed. I'd argue the level design should be much improved. I actually hope that they make backtracking more of a thing and make the later half of the game less raunchy. I really don't need to see a Donkey Kong minecart race kept intact. Now, if that changes to walking through a mine instead with lighting barely visible, I'm much more for the terrifying experience than for some humorous QuickTime event experience. Another thing I want no part of: QuickTime events. Does anyone want that Krauser knife fight, button mashing experience kept in? If you said yes, please escort yourself out of the video. For everyone else, exactly. It's fine as a regular cutscene. I don't feel more connected and involved with a game when there's just sporadic button mashing involved over the top of a cutscene. See, we're already establishing obvious ways to improve the original game. The issues already present in the original Resident Evil 4 of old, fix them. Fancy new coat of modern graphic paint, and voila, success. We did it, everybody. We got it. The perfect Resident Evil 4 remake right there. But hold on. Now, what facts can we take from the trailers given we already know these trailers are near set in stone for the most part? Sure, maybe a scene or two gets removed or cut from the game, but you're pretty much looking at a final product here. The intro dialogue changed to better reflect Leon's past traumas. Good thing. Although he didn't really seem upset about Ada's death at all, at least so far that we've seen, but more in a general sense of, that was terrifying as fuck. As you know, if you played Resident Evil 4, Ada is back. Even shown in the trailer for a brief moment. So if they have a decent enough script, we'll address that at some point when they inevitably meet up. Now, the original Resident Evil 4 did absolutely nothing in character development here. Basically, the two slightly flirted with each other and she ditches him again at the end, blah blah blah. We've seen that before. Anything is an improvement over the nothing that it was. Do Resident Evil fans care about their romance? I do, as there's barely competence in Resident Evil lore as is. Let there be something of value, okay? I don't think changing or not changing Ashley is of much importance. She's a hostage. As long as she's not the annoying nuisance she was in the original, that should be better off right there. If we still are doing a ton of escort missions again, she better be able to at least somewhat defend herself, to a small degree at least. Don't be completely a burden all the time. Probably a split opinion because that nostalgia squad will be here instantly, but doing away with the Ashley escort seems like a positive to me. But when half of the original game was an escort mission, the Resident Evil 4 purists will have pitchforks in hand. I'll try and compromise here and say that at least keep it at a minimum. Please don't make me escort Ashley throughout like half the game again. Please don't do it. Just don't. In the State of Play trailer specifically, they mentioned the Ganado getting an overhaul in design. I take that more as AI, they won't be so dumb and obvious as nearly a 20-year-old game's AI. I expect more variation in character models and more unique scripting to actions they perform, instances they are used in. Updating for modern gaming, leaving the more simplistic features of the original behind. Also, when they say terror of people controlled by madness, making them more in sync as a group attacking you, or more rabid and out of control at times. I think modern gaming should just naturally improve ways of old from the original game. We see some glimpses of Ashley fleeing, curious as to whether this is a playable section of the game or simply a cutscene segment. The trailer mentions wanting to feel loneliness and fear of what's next. Guessing that pertains more to Ashley than Leon, the professional. Ashley's character, personality, and usage looks vastly different from the frightened teenager in the original. I'd wager you'll see the biggest changes in regards to her throughout this new remake. As far as what little bit we've seen of scenery and location so far, it looks like we hit some main locations from the original game. The intro house, the village, the lake monster, the church where Ashley is first located, sections of the castle. That's about the extent, with nothing after about the first half of the game, if I base it off the original's content. Nothing yet on Krauser, barely anything featured on Ada, and if Ada has her own story section or unlockable section. No sight of an annoying Salazar yet, or his personal guards. Still quite a bit, but I wouldn't expect to see content from the second half of the game prior to release anyways. One last character we've also yet to see is our favorite salesman asking us, "What are you buying?"
Something that might interest you.
Likely won't be quite so cheesy if he's in the game, but that tagline should absolutely make it in at least once in the game, or it's just not going to feel quite right. As I mentioned earlier, and in other videos, I think the second half of Resident Evil 4 is its weakness, so I do hope they modify that more so than the first half of the game. We still have a lot of time left before release, and I would all but guarantee another trailer to be revealed before March 24th of next year. Likely after Resident Evil 8's DLC is upon us, as to not take away from that game's spotlight. The roadmap for Resident Evil 4 Remake's success is all laid out in front of it. I don't really see a way in which Capcom completely botches this. It looks like a promising game. Will it please everybody? Definitely not. Resident Evil remakes never do. I'm sure there are gamers displeased with the remakes for 1 and 2, and they'd be wrong. Resident Evil is a survival horror franchise first and foremost. Emphasis on horror. It really looks like they're doing their best to make sure that the atmosphere and story fulfill those requirements. Like I've said throughout this entire video, the blueprint for success is right there in front of Capcom. But can they deliver? Hopefully we see more of those answers very soon, as there's a lot of questions and a lot of things we still have yet to see and know if they are going the right direction. Until then, Leon signing out.